We are here to talk for a few minutes about community and the reciprocal nature of community, and therefore we are here to kick off the 2026 Pledge Drive. Woo! It is that time, friends. Before we do, though, I just wanted to share a little bit about how I found this community. So April and I had moved from Texas, Austin, Texas, not real Texas. I had two little ones, as you know. B was about a year old when I had a conversation with somebody, and I said, I am just lacking community. We don't know people. I just wish that there was a place like a church, but without that, I believe I called it Jesus stuff. And she said, have you heard of the UU? And I was like, the what now? And so April and I tried it out. We saw the church with a big rainbow flag. Come to find out, it was the Congregational Church down the street. So they took us down to the basement and we saw the stack of Bible study books for kids. And we were like, thank you for your time. Realized that was not the UU. It took us a few weeks to find y'all down the road. But when we did, it was a service. And one of the first things that I heard was, 525,600 minutes. And I was like, hark, what is this? Moments later, I heard a poem by Shel Silverstein. And it was like all of these nerdy, progressive, queer, dark blue, angel-like beings came down singing from the heavens and said, Curto, you found your people. And ever since then, we have connected with you as community, and I am filled with gratitude and, of course, belonging.
And so, today you're going to hear a lot about belonging. Our sermon is focused on belonging today, and I'm really excited for this because it is one of the key reasons why I keep coming here and what feeds my soul. And I'm sure it's true for a lot of you. But we also have to be honest that we are sitting in a building. This building has expenses. We have staff that show up every week and throughout the year for the weekly services, for events, and they need to be paid for their time. So we need to come together and support this place. So next week, we are officially starting our pledge drive. We're gonna be having letters that you can pick up after service. We know there's interest in knowing the financial status of the church, having information about the last 3 years. We're going to be providing that so people can see what their pledges are going towards. But more importantly, I want to let you guys know that's what is different this year than previous years, is we're asking for people to consider giving a 5% increase on their pledge. Pledges are the primary source of income for the church, and they've been relatively stagnant for the last couple years while our expenses keep going up with inflation and everything. So we just need to make sure our pledges match the increasing cost. If you can't do it, understandable, right? But we want to plant that seed now. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.
Could screw up the courage to go alone. She watched all these children with envy as they came off the rides, looking excited and a little dizzy. And finally she said to one of the little boys, how did you find the courage to go on the ride? And he said, you don't have to find courage. All you have to do is buy a ticket. So thank you all for buying the ticket to be on this wild ride of congregational life. It's a joy to be sharing the excitement with you. Things in our lives. Jobs, people, relationships, institutions, situations, all of it. Its best characteristic can also be its worst, its most challenging characteristic. In my experience, the best thing is almost always the worst thing at the same time. I think the best thing about getting older is the wisdom that comes with it and all the insight and clarity. But that's also the worst thing about getting older, at least for me. Insight and clarity force me to see what's in front of me, to deal with what is right there. There's no way that I can ignore it or avoid it. With wisdom, there's no pretending. In our shared faith, the best thing about it, I think, is that we affirm the worth and dignity of every single person, which is great because each of us knows that no matter how bad we think we might be, there's always place for us here. There's always room. But the flip side to that is when people are behaving badly, as we all do at some point in our lives, often out of fear, we don't really know how to deal with that. To hold them accountable to our covenant, to call them out publicly, seems to many, especially to their friends, like it would be denying their worth and dignity. So we get caught up in trying to figure out how to respond in a way that would be universally accepted as kind, which is often ineffective because there are so many different ideas of what kind is, right? Kind to one person seems kind of mean to another. So a corollary of that axiom is that the best thing about anything can also be the worst thing, is that the first thing I fall in love with is also the first thing I fall out of love with. You know what I mean? That high-pitched laugh that you thought was really cute on your first date. After a few years of marriage, you can hear it across a lobby at a funeral and cringe just a little bit. Your marriage could be as close to perfect as anyone could hope for, but that laugh you fell in love with, oof. So Dr. Brené Brown knows a lot about paradox in relationships. She's a researcher at the University of Houston and one of the top 10 TED Fellows. We read from her latest book a couple weeks ago during our 2-hour Roots and Wings conversation. Her work is focused on vulnerability and how our relationships grow deeper when we dare exposing our fears and weaknesses. When she first came on the scene, she made an assertion that seemed completely counterintuitive. It made no sense. Vulnerability breeds trust in the other and resilience in ourselves. The paradox is that vulnerability, the appearance of weakness, makes us stronger. Now that assertion has been heard so many times and proven in our own lives in so many ways that it's widely accepted as common sense. Of course, vulnerability builds strength and wisdom and vulnerability. It comes as no surprise, therefore, that Dr. Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness, The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone, is jam-packed with paradoxes. The title alone is a paradox, a reminder of Maya Angelou's assertion that when you belong no place, you belong every place. In all of her writing, Dr. Brown defines belonging as the innate human desire to be part of something larger than ourselves, and says that because this longing is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and seeking approval, which are only hollow substitutes, because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Therefore, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. It's a lot of nodding heads. So let me say that again. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. The way I understand this is that belonging and self-acceptance are intertwined. We can never fully be present to anyone if we are afraid that they will find out that we aren't quite as we make ourselves out to appear. If we are withholding any important part of ourselves, we feel like a fraud. And nobody trusts a fraud. Frauds aren't welcome. Frauds don't belong. And anytime we aren't living up to our values, we're probably going to feel like a fraud. If you really believe in the worth and dignity of every person and you don't do something to stop obvious oppression happening right in front of you, you're probably going to feel like a fraud. Dr. Brown suggests what she calls 4 practices of true belonging, practices that challenge how we think about ourselves and how we show up with one another, and how we cultivate courage and connection. And not surprisingly, they're all paradoxes. First, people are hard to hate close up, so move in. If you don't trust them, become their neighbor, literally or figuratively. Find out what their story is, what they love, what makes them tick. Meet the neighbor whose political signs make you cringe. Start by having a simple conversation about something neutral, and then ask about their family. Ask about what they love, what matters. The second practice of true belonging is to speak truth to what she, in a more vivid way, calls BS. This is the really hard part, especially in these times when our leaders behave so badly and are so invested in dividing us. Be civil about it. And I want to, when I say leaders, I mean in Washington, right? Be civil about it. When someone says something that is patently false or lies about their actions, name it. Don't call them names, don't shame them, don't use words as weapons, and never dehumanize anyone else, even if they're making a sport of dehumanizing others. I'm sorry, but calling somebody a name like the Cheeto in Chief or the Orange Wrecking Ball, it doesn't help. Dehumanizing your opponent doesn't move the conversation along, it stops it. It makes enemies out of the people who might otherwise have been just opponents. The third practice of true belonging is to hold hands. Hold hands with strangers. It sounds completely counterintuitive, but studies show again and again that belief in human connection is our most renewable source of courage. And if you think about it, you know it's true, just as Anne Frank knew that in spite of everything, people really are good at heart. I once heard about a man who leaves hand-carved wooden spoons along the Appalachian Trail, where only 20% of the people who start out with the intention of doing so actually hike the whole thing. But because the legend surrounding the 40 or so spoons he carves each year is so huge, the few people who find them almost universally complete their hikes. Connection with strangers is that great. And finally, the fourth practice of true belonging is to have a strong back and a soft heart. You can only have a big heart and open arms if you take care of yourself first by strengthening your constitution and taking care of your basic needs. If you can do that, if you can have a soft front and a strong back, you are more likely to have the kind of wild heart that can take on anything. So to sum it up, the 4 practices of true, authentic belonging to something larger than yourself are the paradoxes. People are hard to hate close up. Move in. Speak truth to BS. Be civil. Hold hands with strangers. Hold hands with strangers. Strong back, soft front. And all of that will give you a wild heart, braveness. And what makes it hard is that we just aren't living in generous times right now. This is an era when the social default seems to be to assume the worst intentions of other people rather than risking connection with them, especially when we have even the tiniest evidence that they may be differently inclined politically. And trust in that leadership in Washington feels rare indeed. Up until recently, I've always noticed that for myself, and it seems like a lot of others, it's harder to be generous toward ourselves than it is to be toward other people. Historically, we've typically been harder than ourselves than others have been on us. It just doesn't seem to be true anymore. at least not out in the public square where single finger salutations and four-letter words are more commonplace. And in social media where none of the old rules of civility seem to apply. Just a few years ago, it seems like cruelty became the norm in settings of anonymity. It's amazing, isn't it? Now it feels like people use their full names as they insult and even threaten one another openly without fear of retribution or accountability. And trashing political leaders is like a sport. But that's out there online, right? And that doesn't happen here in this congregation among people we live and worship and journey with. You don't wish harm on one another. You show up when you feel like you have something to offer or something to gain in the process, like the peacefulness of sitting amongst each other. You take care of people you know. You reach out in your own ways to newcomers. And we aren't exactly totally trusting all the time perfectly either, are we? And don't get me wrong, I know trust exists here in profound and meaningful ways. You give generously to the annual pledge, and you fulfill your pledges at an amazing rate of 96%, which is really high. You seek to ensure that your staff are fairly compensated, and both of those are characteristics of a trusting institution. You entrust your children to one another. You act as caregivers to one another. You act as teachers and mentors. An amazing number of you have keys and the code to the alarm. That's trust. And most importantly, you invite new people into the trust. You build trust each week as you share your joys and concerns. But how do I know that trust among us, among our members and friends, could be improved? First of all, and this is a biggie, if there were more trust, more people would be willing to take responsibility for leadership, to be on the board, to be on standing committees and task forces. I'm afraid what's going on is that nobody wants to be part of the mistrusted class, because we're so good at mistrusting the leaders out there. I think sometimes that kind of leaks in here and we sort of mistrust the leaders here. We're afraid to be a part of that. Even though the intentions of our leaders are so good, they sometimes get questioned just because we're so accustomed to that. Maybe I'm wrong. But for me, evidence lies in the fact that people often end a term of leadership feeling depleted, sometimes need to make themselves absent for a while. And they're not depleted by the work, but by the expectations. And it's not just here, really. I don't want to make it sound like this is a problem in this country. This is what's going on. It's everywhere. Over the years in multiple congregations, I've seen brilliant, committed, energetic, generous folks take the bold step of making themselves vulnerable and offering their many skills for leadership, and then feeling depleted. And I don't think it will come as a shock to anyone who's been paying attention. They absorb a lot of the anxiety or negativity that can rise up in the form of complaints or helpful suggestions about the most important things. Because there are a lot of different beliefs about what the most important thing is. And they're often in tension with each other. For example, including children is important. They're our future, and more importantly, our present. But some struggle with the noise and the energy, and your leaders hear and do their best to appreciate both perspectives. All of your leaders, not just the board, every committee. While it may take just a few minutes for you to get it off your chest, the board chair, who hears it over and over again from 150 different people, those effects can be really long-lasting. And it's not just here, it's everywhere you belong. And since our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance, it's important that we all start with our own behaviors, right? It's hard, I know. I struggle out in the real world and sometimes here. to be fair and kind. Like I said, trashing leaders has become a sport. The world gets more complex and relationships become more fraught. So the next time on this wild ride, we find ourselves with something important to say, whether it's here in our families or out in our communities, let's remember Brené Brown, shall we? Her 4 practices of true, authentic belonging. People are hard to hate close up. Move in. Speak truth to BS. Be civil. Hold hands with strangers. Strong back, soft front. This is how you have a wild heart that will make you stronger and make your connections deeper. May it be so. Please rise now in body or in spirit for hymn number 66.